Hello, sports fans, and welcome to my first, and well, only, prediction show for the 2015 MLB postseason, which is starting tonight with the Yankees, Astros, and Cubs, Pirates. And I am going to go through and go over my predictions for every round of the playoffs, how I think it'll go, how it may go. And obviously I'm no sports analyst, so there may be some holes with my logic, but these are my World Series predictions and my postseason predictions. So, starting in the American League, Yankees and Astros, and let me just say that I think both of these teams are fairly flawed. I think if you look at the Astros, it's a team that still is inexperienced, young team, some good pitching, very good hitting at times, but coming into the season, nobody expected them to even finish where they have. They were first in the AL West for most of the season, and, they've kind of not played their best baseball the last couple months. Now, you look at the Yankees, another team that has been inconsistent, was also not expected to do much this year, but their bullpen has really helped carry them, despite some of their older players and surprising contributions from A-Rod and different players. But for the most part, the Yankees roster doesn't exactly strike fear into your hearts either. Both teams won around 86 games, so I don't see either of these teams getting very far, to be honest with you. But to pick a winner in this game, I do pick the Astros in a close game, not just because I'm a Red Sox fan, but I do think that the Astros can win this game. I think Dallas Keuchel is the reason they do win this game. I think it'll be a close game. I think that it'll probably be a 1 or 2 run game, and I think it will come down to the bullpens at the end of it all, which, again, I wouldn't be shocked if the Yankees win this game because it's at Yankee Stadium and the Astros are a terrible road team. It's important, though, to kind of put some of the histories behind you, though. I know it's easy to say, this pitcher beat this team, and this team is bad on the road, therefore they're going to win or lose, but I don't know. I see the Astros having a slight edge in this game for some of the reasons I've mentioned before. They have a good lineup. It's not like they can't hit at all. And because of that, and because Dallas Keuchel has been so good all season, and I don't see him having a bad start, I think worst case, maybe he gives up a few runs. So I think that Dallas Keuchel keeps him in the game regardless of what happens, and I just don't believe in the Yankee rotation. Even if the Yankees win this game, I don't see them having a rotation for the next round of the playoffs. Outside of Tanaka, and yes, Severino's been good, but he's a young pitcher too. You don't know what you're going to get. Their bullpen can help them, but their bullpen is more built for the 7th inning on. If their starter blows up early, they can't use everybody in the bullpen and hope to win the game. So it's going to be an interesting game. You pretty much have youth versus experience. The Yankees have been to the playoffs plenty of times. The Astros weren't expected to go anywhere, and I actually think that's going to be an advantage for them. I think the Astros' lack of experience will almost help them because, they're just going to go for broke. They're going to go for everything in this one game. I think there have been a lot of people doubting them all season, and especially how they kind of, to lack of a better word, they kind of blew the AL West to even have to play in this game. So I think the Astros win a close game tonight. Now, going to the National League, this is a fascinating matchup. And I mean, the National League, if this doesn't prove how much better the National League has been in the American League this year, 3 teams in the NL Central finished with better records than the best record in the AL, the Kansas City Royals. The Pirates and the Cubs both have upwards of 96 wins, and they'll be going against each other in Pittsburgh for what seems to be the perennial home of the All-Star, or the wild card game, rather. So you have Jake Arrieta going against Garrett Cole. This is going to be another very close game. Again, I won't be surprised to see either team win it. I think more so than the Yankees-Astros game, this game is a coin toss. I think the Astros will win. I'm a little more sure of that. Not so sure about this pick, but I'm going to say the Cubs win because of Jake Arrieta. I think he's that much better. Although I think Garrett Cole's a really good pitcher. I think 9 out of 10 times Garrett Cole is the winning pitcher in a matchup. Even if it was John Lester, who I like, I think Garrett Cole could beat John Lester. I don't know about Jake Arrieta, just because I don't know if he's going to give up any runs. And as good as Garrett Cole is, he has no margin for error. And even with the game being in Pittsburgh, I think Arrieta can pull this one out, and I think he can go 7 or 8 really strong innings, if not 9. And I think we could be looking at the Cubs beating the Pirates losing their 2nd straight wildcard game. Now, would I be shocked if the Pirates won the game? Of course not. It's in Pittsburgh. One error either way, one mistake by Arrieta could be disaster for the Cubs. But I'm going to go with the Cubs. I got to go with somebody, so I'm going to go with the Cubs for that NL wildcard game. Shifting back to the American League now for the division series, one of the division series, you have the Rangers and the Blue Jays. I actually find this matchup very interesting. These teams are actually fairly similar. The Blue Jays have the clear edge on offense, but don't write off the Rangers. They still have Adrian Beltre, Mike Napoli. Prince Fielders have a really great bounce back season kind of quietly. Sinju Chu on top of that lineup is pretty decent. But, their rotation is actually a pretty good strength. I think that the Rangers' rotation is a bit more balanced than Toronto's. Toronto has David Price at the top. They have R.A. Dickey and Mark Burley, experienced veterans. And they have Marcus Stroman, who's a bit of a wild card. You really don't know if he's going to come back strong or have a bad outing. Now, the reason I will give the edge to the Blue Jays in the series is because even if one of their starters does have a bad outing, like a Marcus Stroman or R.A. Dickey, if they do, I don't even know if R.A. Dickey's going to start in this series, but my point is, if one of their starters gives up, say, 5 runs, normally that would spell the end of the game for most teams, but this Blue Jays team has proven time and time again that they can recover from a bad start. They can win, and I think that the Blue Jays ultimately will win this series. I say it goes 4 games, and I think the Blue Jays will take care of business. Now, the one reason why Texas could win the series, I will admit, is because of Cole Hamels, one of those acquisitions that kind of went under the radar. Well, I shouldn't say that. Cole Hamels was one of the most anticipated pitchers to be traded. But since he's gone to Texas, you haven't really heard much about him. But this is the postseason, and I feel like that's when Cole Hamels shows up the biggest. So it's possible. It's not impossible that Texas can win the series. But I'm going to go with Toronto going to the American League Championship Series. Now, the other matchup will be the Astros and the Royals, at least in my situation. And this is another interesting one because the Astros, in many ways, are where the Royals were last year. The Royals weren't expected to make the playoffs. They won their wild card game in extra innings, but again, they were going against the Angels. Now, this year, Kansas City is kind of the Angels. They have the best record in the American League. The Royals are expected to do a lot. However, this year, I don't see there being a big upset. I think the Royals do take care of business. I think they win it in 4. I think that Houston gets a game at home. They win one of their games at home, but I think the Royals are a very good home team. The Astros are a very bad road team. That's not a good combination. I think the pitching is actually fairly evenly matched, other than Johnny Cueto and a couple decent starters for Kansas City. I don't really see Kansas City winning in on pitching alone, but I think a combination of their hitting, their experience, and their bullpen, obviously, I think that's why Kansas City will win this series and advance to the ALCS over the Houston Astros. Now, in the National League, and turn away, say goodbye, because I'm not very proud of this prediction, but the Dodgers and Mets series is an interesting one. And the Dodgers are one of those teams that I always think should go further than they do. If for no other reason, they have Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw on top of their rotation. And I mean, historically speaking, you don't see rotations like that lose in the playoffs as often as you've seen the Dodgers lose. I mean, the Dodgers haven't gotten to the World Series with those two at the top of their rotation. But for whatever reason, and this is kind of where analytics go out the window, I think, and again, this is just a hunch, and I do love the Mets. I think they've done a lot of great things over there. I think that the Mets' young pitching is going to be a staple for years to come. I think, there's a chance that Matt Harvey, Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, and all them could be, the next Kershaw and Greinke combo. But for right now, with Greinke and Kershaw still at the top of their games, I have to give the edge to the Dodgers in this first-round series. Not only that, but it is a home field advantage for Los Angeles. The Mets are pretty good on the road, though, so, again, this series could go either way, but ultimately I do see the Dodgers winning it. I think this is the year, and I've been saying that for a while, but I think this is the year that Greinke and Kershaw put it together, because between the two of them, and I know besides those two, the rotation isn't great, but between the two of them, you're going to have them starting 4 games out of 5 most likely in the series. Either Greinke or Kershaw will start a game. And I find it hard to believe they're going to have more than one bad outing between the two of them. So the Mets will have their opportunities. I think at Citi Field, they'll probably win 1, if not both of those games. I think this goes 5 games. I think the Dodgers win it in 5. Kind of hope I'm wrong because I am a Mets fan, but I got to go with the Dodgers in that series. Now, St. Louis, this is kind of interesting. St. Louis's reward for winning 100 games is that they have to play either the Cubs or the Pirates. I'm going to go with the Cubs in this one. So, a little rivalry series here. Cubs-Cardinals in the NLDS. So, again, you win 100 games. Now you got to play a 96-win team, which, by the way, has Jake Arrieta and John Lester going. Now, I think it is a slight advantage for St. Louis, although not much, that Jake Arrieta won't be starting Game 1 of that series because he will have been coming off the wildcard game. So, you still have to deal with John Lester, who has some experience beating the Cardinals in the World Series. And this is another series I could see going either way. This is why I find the National League a lot more intriguing than the American League. I think in the American League you have some bigger gaps between teams. I think, the Blue Jays and Royals have kind of been the cream of the crop for the American League. In the National League, it's not so clear. But the Cardinals, because of their experience, because of their pitching, which has been very consistent, And even their hitting has been very good, and I think they're going to get Yadier Molina back. They have Wainwright coming out of the bullpen. We'll see how that goes. It's going to be a close series. I say Cardinals in 5. So, again, we got Cardinals and Dodgers in the National League, and we have Blue Jays and Royals in the American League. So, going back to the American League here for the American League Championship Series. Again, keep in mind this is all fictional for now. This is going to be another one that's going to be tough. I think that the games being in Kansas City will be an advantage. However, see, unlike last year's Royals team, then again, who saw that coming? But I don't see this year's Royals team having as easy of a time with it. I think teams are ready for them now. I think even Houston will give them a slight run for their money. And I think Toronto ultimately will beat the Kansas City Royals in the American League Championship Series. I think it'll go 6 or 7 games, but I think that Toronto's hitting ultimately will outmatch even Kansas City's bullpen. And I just think that Kansas City, as experienced as they are with the postseason, and as you know they had an easy time with it last season, I just don't see it happening 2 years in a row. I don't see that Kansas City team running through the American League the same way they did last year. Besides the fact that they don't have James Shields, they also, I don't know, there's just something about the Royals this year, even though they have a better record and they've really kind of made it look easy for most of the season. I think the Blue Jays, and I think the Blue Jays are the only team in the American League that could beat them. I think if, some other team, if the Yankees somehow got there, well, no, the Yankees couldn't get there. If some other team got to the American League Championship Series, I think Kansas City wins. But if it is Blue Jays Kansas City, which I think it will be, I think the Blue Jays do have a slight edge because of their hitting, because of David Price, because their bullpen is a lot stronger than it was. If their bullpen was still kind of how it was before the trade deadline, I would give the edge to Kansas City. That's how close this series could be. So I'm going to say it's a 6-game series, and I'm going to say the Blue Jays will win it and get back to the World Series for the first time since '93. In the National League, Cardinals-Dodgers, another very interesting series. Now, again, in a 7-game series with Kershaw and Greinke pitching, logic would dictate that the Dodgers have the edge. Of course, the Cardinals earned their home field advantage. They were a 100-win team this year. It's hard to pick against them, but at the same time, you look at the history of Major League Baseball, and, it's happened that the best team gets to the World Series and wins the World Series, but it's not always the case. You have a lot of teams, like even last year's Royals, the Giants from a few years back. They're not the best teams in the league, but they're hot at the right time. And I think that could be the case with the Dodgers, or even the Mets. I think it's going to be an interesting finish here. But I do have the Dodgers beating the Cardinals in 7 games. I think, the Dodgers and Cardinals have met in the postseason a few times. I think the Dodgers are kind of hungry. I think they're angry about losing to the Cardinals so many times. I don't think this is the best Cardinals team to go against them, believe it or not. Even though they have more wins, I feel like they're missing a lot of their key pieces, Matt Holliday being one of them. I don't know if Yadier Molina is going to be 100%. Wainwright out of the bullpen, it could be effective, it could not be effective. So you got to worry about that. The Dodgers do have some offense. They're known for their pitching, but they can hit in the clutch. And I just see that being enough to give them the win. So right now I have Dodgers and Blue Jays in the World Series, believe it or not. Nothing would surprise me, if the Mets got through, if the Cubs got through. But just keeping it as strictly objective as I can right now, I think that it's going to be one of the best pitching rotations against one of the best all-around hitting teams in the league. I think it's going to be a great World Series between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays if that happens, because of everything I mentioned. You're going to have the best hitters in the league, arguably, going up against Clayton Kershaw and Zach Greinke, and David Price is no slouch either. He's probably the best pitcher in the American League, so it's going to be a very interesting series. I think, and again, this is another toss-up, but I have the Blue Jays winning the World Series in 6 games against the Dodgers, because of David Price, believe it or not. I think that David Price gives them that edge that they might not have otherwise had. I think that the Dodgers are probably the one team that can keep the Blue Jays at bay offensively. I don't see the Blue Jays scoring a lot of runs, but I think they'll score enough to win this series. The reason being they have David Price to counter Clayton Kershaw or Zach Greinke. And Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw are going to have a bad start here or there. I'm not saying they're going to be perfect and throw perfect games every time out. I do think in all their postseason starts, they're suspect to that. I mean, Clayton Kershaw, just look it up. He's not as good in the postseason. But that doesn't mean he'll be terrible either. I think he will be very formidable. I think this series will go 6 games. I think Toronto having the home field advantage is a help. Toronto's home crowd is very ravenous, very rabid, very eager fan base. and behind, David Price. And by the way, Mark Burley's not bad either. He has some postseason experience. So, again, I have the Blue Jays, believe it or not, winning the World Series. And I'm really rooting for a lot of these teams. This postseason is going to be fascinating because other than the Yankees, there's really no one in the postseason I hate. There's no one I don't want to see at least do well. I like the Astros. They're a good story. The Cubs are a great story. If anything, the Cardinals I'm kind of tired of because they're always in the postseason. But the Dodgers, they've been knocking on the door for the last few years to get into the World Series. I think this is the year they do. And I think that the Blue Jays might finally have their breakthrough season after years of being kind of paraded around because the Blue Jays always make some big move. But it seems like this year it actually worked out. And I think they have the pieces this year to win. And I do think it's a short window for the Blue Jays. I don't know if the Blue Jays will be there next year. So if they are lucky enough to get to the World Series, I do hope they win it because I don't see the Blue Jays or the Royals, for that matter, sticking around for long. I don't really know who the future World Series contenders are going to be in the American League. The American League hasn't really shown much this year. But that is my World Series pick. Blue Jays over the Dodgers. I really did think about this long and hard. So again, I'm not saying that, I'm just throwing it out there, but I'm also not 100% sure about it. So, that said, let me know what your World Series picks are. The postseason gets started tonight with the Yankees, Astros, Pirates, and Cubs. So, again, just let me know what's going on, and let's go baseball.